Welcome to Homeschool Life. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Adriana.
And we are talking today. We have some guests, Craig Housen, Noah Ravoy, and Anna Goldie. And we are talking about homeschooling in this era where homeschooling is about to explode. We've got some statistics and things, but we want to hear from these homeschoolers and see what their experiences are. Would you like to say something, Adriana?
No, it's more going to be a round table for all families to share their experiences with homeschooling, because we've all had some great things to share with others.
And we have some unique experiences with all these individuals. So I wanted to get a good eclectic mix. Let me go on to some general facts and statistics on homeschooling and the trends. There are about 2.5 million homeschooling students, grades K through 12 in the United States. That's about 3 to 4% of the school-age population. And as far as 2019, that's about 2.5 million homeschoolers. New national survey suggests a surge in homeschooling this year. 15% of families say they're very likely to switch to homeschooling full-time, and that would be an additional 7.5 million homeschoolers. That's a 441% increase. Since 1960, we've increased K through 12 spending by 280%. The U.S. spends about $15,000 per child in the public school system. Taxpayers spend nothing on homeschoolers and homeschool families. They spend on average $600 per student for their education. Some of the top reasons, according to a recent national survey: the satisfaction by school type. 83% say that they have a very positive view of homeschooling. Then next is 73% for public charter schools, then private schools at 68%, and the satisfaction by school type of public school is about 50% satisfaction rate. The top 3 reasons for homeschooling: number 1 is safe environment. Number 2 is individual or one-on-one attention. And the number 3 reason is morals, characters, or values. So that's kind of gives a general overview. Adriana?
That's a revelation in the top 3, seen as more family-oriented things.
Right.
Being a safe environment, one-on-one attention, morals, characters, and values. That right there just shows you that that's something that you get immediately by just being with your family.
Of course. And of course, half of the parents say that safe environment. So that's 50% say it's safe environment. So anyway.
So let's do a little of a round table. You guys, I'd like for you to
introduce yourselves.
Say a little bit about your homeschooling experience.
Who would you like to start?
I'll start off.
Okay.
So my name is Noah Ravoy, and I'm a coach that helps people in relationships. So I often help parents dealing with their children. I help parents dealing with each other as well, married couples. And I help people to figure out how to have healthy and happier relationships. My actual journey in homeschooling started in my own school. So when I was younger, I was deeply unsatisfied with the kind of public school education that I was getting. The school was extremely violent. You know, you mentioned safety. That was actually the number 1 problem with our school. There was violence from inter-student violence. There was violence between teachers and students. There was sexual predation on students. It was really a terrible environment to be in. And it didn't leave any room for learning. You were too busy protecting yourself, watching your back in order to have any time to learn. And I got very unsatisfied with this, but I'd never heard of homeschooling. I didn't know that it was possible until I was visiting some friends and their children had just started homeschooling. And so we talked about it, and I was about 14 at the time. And I implemented a plan in my life to get into homeschooling. And basically by the end of the school year, I just told my parents I'm not going back next year. And they said, well, you have to, you're a kid and that's what you have to do. And I'm like, no, you can send me there. But once I'm out of the house, you can't see where I am. I'm just not going to go to the school. I'm going to go to the library or just hang out. And they thought it was better that, you know, at least this way they cooperate with what I wanted. And I was able to essentially push it through on my own, and they didn't really help me with the schooling at all. And I think when you're 14 years old, you can do self-directed study. If you're a reasonably intelligent individual, I'd already spent years on extracurricular programs where I was taught how to study for religious reasons and other things like that. So I created my own homeschooling curriculum until high school. And after that, I got a private school where you didn't attend. They would send you the work. You could do it at home, or you could phone and attend, whatever you wanted to do. And I finished high school in about 18 months and graduated with a very high score. Whereas in public school, I've been doing terribly because I just didn't want to attend. I was missing so many classes that I was on the verge of failing just due to attendance issues. Now, this flavored my understanding of school. And it's funny that when I came to Europe, I ended up being an educational consultant because I knew everything that was wrong with the schools from being there. I don't have a degree in educational consulting, and yet that's what I ended up doing. And I worked a lot with private schools, helping them to avoid the mistakes public schools made. And even then I came to the conclusion that the large group schooling process is the problem, not just the fact that the government runs public schools. And so for my own son, we're doing homeschooling. He technically is in a private school, but the private school doesn't have obligatory attendance, so he attends at home. If he ever has any need, if we need some help from a teacher, we can always go to the school and he can attend a class if he wanted, or, you know, we can have the assistance of a teacher. So it works out really well. And we're here, of course, I'm in Portugal. So the rules are different all over the world, and yet all over the world, because of COVID, people are looking towards homeschooling. Even in the countries where it's completely banned, people are thinking about moving. I've had several people tell me they want to move out of, for example, Germany, because they can't homeschool there. So I think this is really becoming an international, global issue of importance.
Go ahead.
How old is your son, Noah, for people who don't know?
He just turned 7.
Okay.
And my focus so far in his schooling has been, you know, we just had twins as well about 10 months ago. So this last year has kind of been a wash. You have twin babies. You don't sleep much. Nobody in the house sleeps much. So school has been very kind of loosey-goosey this year. And my focus though with him is on, I want him to understand people and social situations and to be able to memorize stories before he learns how to read. So he actually can't read yet. But he knows dozens of stories. He can interact and socialize with people very well. And the focus was on those hard skills, sort of like what the Finnish model is, where you focus on the social interactive skills, and only at around 7, they start implementing reading. And so we're doing that. We're implementing the reading. And now we're not hitting resistance because he's now ready for it. It's at a time when he feels comfortable with it.
Exactly.
Yes. Appreciate it. Craig?
Okay, well, I guess my experience is somewhat unique too, in that I share some of Noah's, I guess, experience in the public school system. That really kind of set me off. In fact, it set me off years ago. I've been living in China for the last 17 years, and COVID brought me back to Canada. Although I think that we still have some finishing up to do in China. So it's probably going to still be a year or two before we can really liquefy our assets there and leave the school that we have. We have a Montessori school there in reasonable shape for the company that we're going to be selling it to. So it's going to be a process because obviously COVID has really been a huge blow to our bottom line. You know, the things are getting back to normal. I think we had about 68 children in the school pre-COVID. We had parents that were on waiting lists. We did interviews with parents, so we didn't have to. We could really, you know, scrutinize the children and specifically the parents that were coming in. So it's very unfortunate because Now we're in a situation where our expenses and things like that have required us to, seek children now, and it's flipped the script a little bit. But anyways, what led me to, and I guess why homeschooling is still relevant, is that my 3 children now, 10, 7, and 2.5, have always been in my own school, and they've always been beside me. And that means that although I have not been officially homeschooling, it does mean that I've been I've been very big in their upbringing from the start. So now Montessori, I guess, is kind of the philosophy the main philosophy that I come from. I have I actually, well, I didn't go to China with an understanding of Montessori. I had a background in, well, actually I did, in Canada here, I went and did corrections in college, in like a local college. And I actually worked in the Toronto jail for a while. I worked in a group home. And I realized that that wasn't a direction I wasn't going to go in, because it just the people there were just worn out, right? It wasn't productive to change people who don't want to change. And so when the opportunity to go to China came up, I went, and I still kind of came across all the same problems in the educational institutions, although they were private, that I was working at in China. It just seemed like the adults at that time who I was teaching were incapable. The Chinese adults, in their 20s or up, were just so fearful of error. And I thought, well, obviously this educational system creates a fear of getting things wrong, right? Because you're punished if you're wrong, and therefore, when you're learning a language, you have to be open to error. You have to be open to taking risks and being somewhat playful. In fact, I mean, that's how I learned Mandarin Chinese, was being playful, just making a kind of game out of it. And it didn't take long before I could speak in basic sentences, and was really kind of, it was just like a snowball effect, right? And so I kind of came to the understanding of what Maria Montessori codified. I mean, she has a concept called control of error, and that is this control of error is based on your awareness of kind of, for example, putting together like a phone, for example. If you had a phone and you took it apart and you tried to put it back together, and it didn't work, well, then that's the kind of the reinforcing aspect that you have to go back and figure out what you've done incorrectly, and reassess it through observation of the process, the error process. So, and language really is all about that, right? When you're learning a new language, you just have to go through that. And anyways, that process of realizing that hadn't yet led me to Maria Montessori, but I was, I was looking at different approaches to education. I was listening to Stefan Molyneux a lot at the time, and I knew that he was homeschooling, and one thing led to another, and I came across Maria Montessori after reading an article written by Ayn Rand, and she identified something that I was also seeing later on in the classrooms, which was that, like, say, a normal, regular kindergarten classroom, that the children are kind of thrown into this classroom together, and they have not individuated. And so they really can't hold their values. They can't hold any sense of themselves. And it becomes this kind of mob of children just kind of running amok, whether they're grabbing stuff out of each other's hands, or they're battling to get one block or one series of toys. And in that article, she really kind of, I think, hit the nail on the head in a lot of respects. And that led me to kind of Montessori, and I went and did the American Montessori certification, AMS, in Shanghai. And at the time I was working in just regular traditional style kindergarten, and I took a huge pay cut. But it needed to happen because I had my daughter. She was only a few months old at the time. So I needed to because I wouldn't have put my own kid in the schools that I was working in, and I needed to make the shift. So anyways, that's probably more long-winded than you wanted, but
so for you, it was about the safety issue with your daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was in these schools and I was really trying to make change, and I was pissing off a lot of the, management and stuff who just wanted us to kind of, go in there and, in China, we're just basically a talking monkey, right? Just go in and do your talking monkey bit and who cares? Yeah, they're making money. But I was more interested in genuine education and wanting to help these kids to have a different perspective, not only on culturally. China has a lot of, obviously, as we know, authoritarian, the system is very authoritarian. And I wanted to try to be somewhat of a bulwark, I guess, against some of that. And anyways, I did come up against a lot of, people who didn't want to change anything, which in the end I realized, is pointless. It's not going to change. So, getting into a Montessori environment was absolutely, it was life-changing just for, not only for me as a teacher, but also for my kids who have benefited so much from it.
Craig, did you find that, and this is kind of some of the things that we discovered, once we got into Montessori, we found that the relationship between ourselves improved, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, but it's like a peaceful parenting, but peaceful education more actually. It's more like that, and plus maximizing satisfying the children's developmental needs.
Sure.
Because there's more than just the intellect. There's so many things, and their brain, part of their development in the brain is learning when they're young. So it's the absorption of all that information. And so because they're already set that way, there's no need for us to dump information into them. That's their chance to absorb it in their way and make their own discoveries. So it makes it's more open-minded to making them make their own decisions and make them stronger as being responsible for themselves, not having to need someone else telling them what to do and what to think.
Right. Okay, Anna.
You mentioned the unhealthy relationship that public schooling tends to create between people and failure. And I say that it's an unhealthy relationship because it's not that you seek failure, but if you avoid failure at all costs, you also never make a success at anything, because you can't become successful until you're willing to take risks, and some of that means you're going to fail. And I think that actually does a lot to improve relationships as well, because the main reason people don't communicate is they're afraid of doing it poorly and making the relationship worse. And as you start to understand that you can't communicate without all communication has the risk of misunderstanding, and you must accept that could happen. And that entire relationship to failure, how that improves by not putting your kids in public school, and even by just simply learning yourself to have a healthy relationship with failure, even with your kids, that really does a lot to improve relationships. And, in my coaching of adults, about 50% of people that I coach, that's the primary thing holding them back, is their fear of failure. And I have absolutely brilliant people who won't take their next step forward unless they're absolutely sure that they'll be successful. And that makes them not take anything, any large step that could really advance their life. They're too afraid to do, and they will only do when they get pushed to do it. And that's, I think, where most people are stuck. They won't make their life go forward unless they're absolutely forced to do it. And when you don't fear failure anymore, you can move ahead at a rapid rate, much faster than other people.
Right, and that fear is how it gets installed in our indoctrination process of the school system, is that you're not going to be competent. You need someone to tell you how to do things. And that's why people are so fearful and lack confidence to say, I can do this. You know, that's not how people think.
Right.
So
Anna,
yeah.
would you like to go?
Oh, we can't hear you, Anna.
No volume.
You're mute.
You're unmuted, but where are you unmuted? You should click on the arrow and see if it's using your microphone properly.
Any better?
There
Yes.
it is.
Awesome.
Can hear ya.
About that, my husband uses this for work, and he's a call center manager, and he has to use a separate microphone, so he disables this one, and I forgot it was disabled, so my bad. My name is Anna, and I am a stay-at-home mom of 2 girls. We have a 2-year-old toddler and a 6-month-old infant, and I plan to homeschool them, and we do homeschool them right now because homeschooling starts as soon as they're born, pretty much. So I was raised in Boise, Idaho, and I was put in public school. My parents lived in areas where we were put in the best public schools there were, but the best public school I don't think really exists. Like, it's sort of an oxymoron. There was a lot of indoctrination in those public schools. It was very left-leaning, very communist sort of undertones, and even living in a pretty conservative area of the country, there was still a lot of Marxist indoctrination, even from a young age. And I never really felt like I fit in public school. I was a lot smarter than a lot of the other kids in my class, and so I just felt bored a lot. And my younger brother, he's 4 years younger than me, so we went to elementary school together. And he wasn't able to read for a long time, despite efforts to try and teach him. And he was punished a lot in the public school for not being able to read, and he was treated as if he was stupid. He's a really bright guy now. But I just saw firsthand how terrible the public school environment was for kids with different learning styles, like myself and my brother, and how it really put my brother at a disadvantage. And how it made him feel stupid, because the way that they were being taught was just not what worked for him. So, and I didn't know anyone that was homeschooled either. Everybody I knew was in public school, and that was the way things were. So my desire to homeschool came from being introduced to Stefan Molyneux in 2013, and he grew my desire to not only homeschool, but become a parent and be a stay-at-home, peaceful parent. And I was turned on to Montessori by Jonathan and Adriana, and the things that they've shared. So I had never heard of Montessori until a few years ago when we connected as friends, and so I'm very thankful for that. So since learning about Montessori and having our first daughter in 2018, I've implemented a Montessori-inspired home environment for our girls, so we can be sure to help their unique learning styles and foster a huge amount of independence from a young age. So far that's been working out great for us. We love it.
That's
fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, what are share some pros, some good things on homeschooling.
If I can speak, I'll respond if I can respond to Anna a little bit, because having 3 children, I've really got to see how each child learns uniquely. And this is something that in homeschooling or in a Montessori environment, it can be dealt with. I mean, first of all, you have mixed ages, right? So there is no one size fits all. And that is a major flaw of the public school system, or even, a traditional private school environment. My 2-year-old was 2.5 years old now, but when he was not even 2, he knew all his phonics sounds. Whereas my older son, who's 7 now, still mixes up the sounds for B, D, and P because he struggles with seeing them. And one of the things that with parents, right, when you are observing, and that's a key component of a Montessori approach, is that you are observing the children. So you are looking for the places where the areas where they struggle, and you are facilitating actually bringing their awareness to the things that they cannot see. And why this is so different is that most of what is kind of force-fed down our throat in public school is oftentimes, and it was the case for me, because I was just lost in abstraction, right? And I could not see the concepts that they were trying to get me to understand. I could not, there was just no capacity to see it. And so it was, they could have been speaking to me in Mandarin at the time when I was in public school. And when you know that children learn at different paces, you can accommodate that. And you can really focus in on the areas that they need more focus on. So anyways.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about homeschooling is, parents talk about how much work it's going to be. But a lot of kids, they have 2 or 3 hours of homework every single day from a public school. That's all you're spending on homeschooling is 2 or 3 hours a day. It's actually no more work than it would be otherwise. And because you're encouraging more independence in your children, you tend to find that it actually becomes easier to parent homeschooled kids than it is to parent publicly schooled kids, especially. But even if they're at a very chaotic private school, it can be almost as bad as homeschooling. And the issue is you're not having to undo the damage that's done to them throughout the day, and then also have to do all this homework. I do remember when I was a kid, fortunately, my parents were very, they didn't care if I did homework or not. It's up to you is basically what they said, because they didn't see that there was any value in it. And, if I got in any trouble, they would just, they'd take the paper, go, who cares, and throw it out because they weren't concerned. They knew that it was valueless. But a lot of kids, a lot of schools have the parents completely convinced that without homework, the children aren't learning anything. So they have to be in school for 8 hours a day and then 3 hours of homework. If you made an adult work 11 hours a day, you'd get in all kinds of trouble. You just can't make adults work that much. I've seen kids that had homework all through the weekends too. They give you homework just before summer vacation, and you don't have to worry about any of that with homeschooling. You get to choose the velocity that the kids are working at. And it's somewhere between what you can accommodate and what they can accommodate, because it does have to work for the parents as well. But it's often way less work than public school. And that's something most people underestimate. They think they think, oh my God, I can't handle 3 hours of homeschooling or of homework. How am I going to handle 8 hours of school? It's not 8 hours of school.
No, it's not. In fact, that's one of the first misconceptions that people have when they can contemplate the idea of homeschooling. Is like, I don't think I have the patience to be with my kid for that long a time, 5, 6, 8 hours a day. I was like, no, you don't understand. The majority of time that is used at public school is on managing people, right? The actual learning that happens is very short.
It's very minimal because everything is so abstract and children are not capable of retaining that information.
Right.
Hence the need for tests, because they need to prove somehow that they are learning something. But the thing is, they're banking on their temporary memory so much that they say they're going to study really hard to pass the test, and they pass it, and there's the school's proof that they're learning something, but the kids are not retaining it because they'll forget it later.
And exactly.
Yeah, I call it educational bulimia. You take in all this information, then you vomit it out on a test.
Well, yeah,
you didn't get any nutrition out of it, but it looks really good for the the standardized government statistics, because we all need to fit into a box. So it's really easy to make people fit into a box with a test, and this is why they're so fond of that. Just because you can do a test doesn't mean you can do anything in real life, and vice versa.
And hence why we have parents now, product of that system, who can't teach, who feel they can't teach their children. They're saying, they're finally realizing, I didn't learn this information really well myself.
I know, and that's one of the biggest problems is we don't teach children in public school how to teach, right? That's actually the core of learning, is to be able to absorb something and be able to give it away to someone else. And because then you're just memorizing facts for a test.
Right.
And so now parents, they have a degree, they have their high school degree, and many have diplomas and advanced diplomas.
Right.
But when you say, well, I have to teach my child this, they have no idea how to do that, because the only thing they remember is, I started to get interested in this one subject, and now the bell rang, and I have to switch my mind to this other subject. And that doesn't work for actually learning. And that's one of the benefits of homeschooling is you don't teach to grades, you teach to mastery.
Mm-hmm.
You teach a child, and if they know it, they know it, and then you give them credit for it.
Mm-hmm. This is why I like the Montessori method so much, because it's so flexible and open to be able to apply it in the homeschool environment so easily, because you have the multi-generational children too, who create that little community where they help each other, and the older children test their mastery levels by being able to teach their little siblings. Go ahead, Craig.
That's what I was exactly going to say, right? That is, instead of having a teacher grade the student and arbitrarily in a lot of cases just give them a number or a letter, A, B, or C, depending on whether they like the kid. And that was something that happened to me. I was maybe unliked by a teacher, so you get a bad mark, right? And instead of that, you have children basically discovering on their own, because they try to teach something and they realize, whoa, wait a minute, this is difficult. And this is actually a way of gauging whether the child really does comprehend the material, because they're able to, in fact, start teaching it. My daughter, she worked, for hours yesterday with my older son, and they had music, they had painted these sticks that they'd found, and they added. She said they were bones, right? They had like little skulls on them, and it was like this choreographed with music and like martial arts, and then they were practicing, and it was completely spontaneous. It just completely emerged from boredom, actually, which is, I think, a key aspect too. A lot of parents actually fear boredom, and when you're in a Montessori environment, if you're in a homeschooling environment, you don't actually have to kind of slip in the gadgets. You don't have to entertain your kids. You can actually let the boredom do what it's meant to do, which is have your children kind of come face to face with a sense of emptiness, which is healthy. It leads to creativity. It leads to finding solutions to that are often learning solutions. It's not necessarily just try to play, whether it's video games or whether it's just something that kind of wastes time away.
But basically, you don't have to entertain your children. Just have an environment where they feel comfortable. Some resources in there, some things that they love to put their hands into. That's all you need, and they just take over.
Right, and that's where a lot of even peaceful parenting comes in, because whenever there's a low stress environment, creativity happens. And you say boredom, but that's actually a very good point. You're not going to be very creative if you're stressed and bored.
Or busy.
Yes.
If you're overly busy, you're really focused on this thing. You're not really open to creating a solution to something else, right?
I think. Go ahead.
I think that parents, that's one of the reasons why technology and gadgets, whether it's passing your kids your iPhone or giving them an iPhone or putting them in front of Netflix. It's the parents' fear of their children's boredom that actually is destroying creativity. If the children are in an environment that has, you have access to books, you have access to, whether it's art materials or things that, having observed them, that they enjoy, and they're prepared, they're ready for them to go and take without, being told what to do, then they're going to do that. Kids are incredibly industrious. They come up with solutions to their own boredom. It's not necessary for parents to always, find a solution to that. And I think the balance too between kind of structure and freedom is really important here. I have, in fact, in my own experience, observed even Montessori classrooms where there's not enough structure, and that can also devolve into chaos as well. So that structure freedom is really important too.
Yeah, I remember us having, when it was me at home while Jonathan was working at that time, I remember having a little area in my house with recycled materials, or materials that I collected, like empty toilet paper rolls, things like that.
Egg cartons.
Tissue. It's like I had all these things because I figured, something's going to happen if I keep these here, whatever, bubble wrap. And lo and behold, things were created. We had architectural structures, marble runs, all these things that got created. And I think it just comes to show you that all you have to do is just collect a few things. They'll figure out what to do with a box eventually.
Yes. Even a cat will figure out what to do with a box. But yeah, it's that's one of the things that people don't realize is it's even once you get into the mode of homeschooling, it's de-stresses yourself, and you yourself as the homeschooler every day, you start realizing that I don't have to worry so much about my child getting behind, because their ability to learn and grasp things is actually a lot faster than you realize. It's like with our daughter, I was sitting there working at a computer, and she comes up and says, Daddy, I think she was like 4. Mm-hmm. And she says, I wrote my name in Morse code. I'm going, what? So she gets it. It's like ... dash. And I looked and I looked it up online. It's like, yeah, that's your name in Morse code. I said, where did you learn that? And she goes, from your navigation book. She pulled it off the shelf and figured it out.
Yep. It's that independence that I want parents to. This is why I show them this Montessori, because it's so much about children's independence. If you don't have to master things first to pass it on, you just get them to a certain level of a foundation where they're confident to just learn by themselves, and they'll just figure things out on their own, things that interest. And I think that they learn more that way, because they go at a faster pace, they go into more in depth into that study, and they're so proud that they did it themselves. That's why it's really awesome.
A lot of we were talking about dealing with boredom. A lot of what people say when they say they're bored, what it really means is they don't have anything to disassociate themselves at the moment, and so they're so in the moment that it's painful because they're not used to it. And school has a lot of programs throughout the day to keep you disassociated. You never get a chance to really open up your mind and get fully into anything, because every few minutes there's a bell ringing and moving you to a new room, or some kid bothering you, or somebody asking you a question. It's incredibly disruptive. So you never get into a flow.
And if you ask a question,
you have to start off with boredom to get to a flow state. Because if you have too much stimulation, you can't get into the flow state. And this leaves people who have been raised in that with a out of shape mind. The mind is out of shape. I've had a lot of client sessions where halfway through the client session, it's only an hour-long session, and halfway through, they're mentally exhausted from thinking about their problems. It's been too much deep discussion, and I will see them over the course of several sessions slowly build up the mental, emotional energy to focus on things long enough to finish whole hour session. And you'll notice this I noticed this with a lot of people that I have had work for me in the past, is that the time they need to be almost distracted with things to do, because otherwise, if they have nothing to do, they get depressed because they start thinking about all of their undone life things. And so this is why it's not just about learning the stuff you need to know. It's about having a healthy mind, a healthy, properly functioning mind. If you've got emotional things that need to be dealt with, dealing with them. And children's emotions are way, way more out of control than an adult, because the controls that are on emotions are built as you get older. You're not born with them. And so they need to spend a fair bit of time thinking about, you ask your kid, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And they don't really ask you that in school. They tell you how you should feel about things. They tell you what you should think about things. And then you have to imitate or at least make the outer appearance that you're imitating correctly, the acceptable level of enthusiasm for whatever's going on. And so you don't really get a chance to develop yourself as an inner person. You're just kind of an automaton imitating what a person should do. And this is a profound difference that I think is really missed out. And you can see this when you see someone that either dropped out of school really young or never went to school, period, is that adult stuff is easy for them. They usually find, what people call adulting. They find these things easy because it's easy for them to spend long periods of time thinking about what needs to be done and doing it.
That's a very good point, and I think there is a tie between the methodology used in public school system and the arrested development of people like the clients that you've mentioned, is that they don't have the ability to concentrate for long periods of time, or even think about something. Because what happens in public school, if you actually start engaging, and your mind as a child says, oh, that kind of draws me in, and you raise your hand, and the people around you are like, oh God,
Yeah.
and it's like shamed for raising your hand. And that's really that just aggravates me, because I was usually the kid that raised my hand.
Well, you ask a question and you see the teacher sweating bullets because it's not in the book, so it means they don't know the answer. And because we have to understand that a teacher is only educated to the very bare minimum necessary to teach the curriculum. There's no money wasted on teaching them one step beyond that, so yet they still aren't efficient with money, but they're really taught to the lowest possible level necessary to educate kids. And I swear teachers found it really uncomfortable to have me in the classroom, because I wanted to know why, and I wanted to know how we knew that was why. And it was just way too much for them, and they would, they didn't know what to do, and it was pre-internet days. Otherwise they could have just told me to Google it. But that's the saving grace for current teachers, is they can tell you to Google it, or they can Google it on their phone and answer you. But it is this, and that is part of the problem too, is that the current school systems are set up is that the teacher is the source of knowledge.
Oh yeah, I typically would challenge my teacher, especially in ninth grade. My science teacher, I remember one time in class he said, well, water is incompressible. And I go, no, actually you can compress it. He goes, no, it's not. I was like, wait, tomorrow I'll bring a book. And so the next day I brought in my dad's book on water compressibility tables, his engineering data book. And so he goes, well, it's practically incompressible. I said, but that's not what you said.
Anyway, we gotta start wrapping it up.
Yes.
What is quickly some advice you want people to take? You want to have people take away from this, so that they look forward to homeschooling and maybe not be so nervous about it. What is some advice you would give to those people?
I've got some advice, especially with young kids. So I think it's best to get started when they're super young, because it's easier and you can make mistakes and they don't really notice. Like, I don't mean like mistakes like not being nice to them or something, but like you didn't prepare something the right way, or you get a little messy sometimes, and it's fine. Like, it's doesn't need to be high stress. It can be really relaxed. Kids are very good at going with the flow, especially when they're young and haven't been put in public school. And so I guess the big takeaway for me, like a few years ago when I first learned about homeschooling, I was like, I don't know the first thing about homeschooling, and kind of like, I think what Noah said earlier about, what do I do with my kids for 8 hours? What are we going to learn for that long of a period of time? But what I eventually learned through mostly you guys is that it doesn't have to be all day, and it doesn't have to be high stress, and it doesn't have to be extremely formal, and it's not like, there's a lot of fear associated with that, and really it's pretty relaxing, and it's low stress, and it's nice. So I guess the main takeaway is, don't be too hard on yourself, and try and get rid of those preconceptions that have been drilled into us since childhood,
Yes.
and take it easy.
Well said.
I think and this is going to sound a very unusual advice. It sounds like it has nothing to do with homeschooling, but if you're a parent, especially for mothers, and you're not sure about it, and you're going to send your kid off in September, and you're not really sure what to do, because a lot of people, they'll start September, and halfway through, a lot of the homeschoolers that end up there halfway through September, they'll give up. Do this every morning before you send your kid out. Give your kid a long hug. Give them a big, long hug. And it sounds funny, but smell your kid, because women are very, their olfactory senses are very strong, and that's very much connected to it triggers the love hormones in their brain when they smell their children. And just hold them tight, and if you still want to send them to school, fine, but do that every morning. It won't be very long, and you're not going to want to be sending them to school anymore. And then after that, listen to your feminine intuition to not send your children away. Listen to that. That's your body and your mind telling you something very important, that your small children should not be that far away from you for most of the day. Listen to that instinct, and keep your children close with you. And the rest of it is the easy part. Honestly, deciding to homeschool is harder than the actual homeschooling.
Right. Very good.
Very well said.
Greg, you get the last word.
Yeah, I would suggest that under the circumstances too, with COVID, and the way that many of these schools are setting up, you've got kids who are going to be masked, whether they've got some kind of crate around the table, or they're lining up in circles. This is going to be essentially impossible for young children to follow any of these kinds of ordinances. So we can expect that in order to get kids to comply, the system is going to have to become even more authoritarian than it's already been. And you really, really don't want to put your kids in those kinds of environments. It's going to leave real trauma. It's going to last for years. And the truth is, you can do this at home. We've already talked about, practicing error, right? And you can do this as a parent. You can practice with your kids making errors. Just be open about it. Say, I'm learning too. And you know what? You'll make mistakes, and it's perfectly fine. Your kids are going to use you as their example. They're going to see that you're not fearful of making errors, and it's going to have a huge impact on a whole lot of areas. When you make the relationship with your children the primary, it has a huge downstream effect, and I can't recommend it enough. There's no way any peer or any teacher in a public school or in a private school will ever be able to connect with your own children better than you can.
That's absolutely true. Thank you very much.
Said. Thank you all for being in attendance and sharing your views. You guys bring a lot of great insights, made really good points that we can't cover them all. So we really appreciate that you guys really made those points very useful. I think a lot of parents will, after hearing you guys, are going to say, hey, you know what, this homeschooling thing is not a bad deal at all. It's actually the best deal ever. So thank you.
So yes, thank you. And thank you for being with us. Remember, if you want to schedule a session with us, you can do so at homeschoollife.net. If you
follow us on Facebook,
follow us on Facebook and on Twitter.
Everywhere. We're everywhere.
And if you want to give a donation, we really appreciate it. Go to our Patreon page. Thank you, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.